And we are live. Excellent. I'm so excited for this, Brian. We'll give it a few minutes here and I'll vamp while we make sure everything's working. But I've been counting down the days for us to do this AMA. I think we talked about it. I don't know, 6-8 months ago we started talking about doing this.
Probably about a year ago. Maybe you mentioned it.
We did all the series on all the different Core Web Vitals stuff. So I know that's when we were kind of talking about it. But I wore you out for like 4 or 5 months in a row with webinar presentations.
Those surprisingly took a lot more work than I thought they would in between my normal stuff that I have going on.
Yeah, it's not like you're doing anything.
But I think they were really great to go through, though.
Yeah, even I reference them all the time.
Yeah, even I learned some things, like diving into some of the stuff, like documenting more of it.
Yeah, I'll run a test on a site and it'd be like, oh, you know, this could be improved or whatever. I'm like, how do I do that again? And I'll just go back to those blog posts or look at the video and like, okay, this is what I need to do to go fix it. So it's like a field guide. What is up, everybody? Looks, we got Craig here. We got Rob here. Good to see y'all here. Notification reminded you. Thank you. Glad that worked. Craig, good to see you. Let me know if y'all can hear us okay. I could hear it on my end, but I didn't want it playing back at the same time too much. We got lots of questions already queued up, ready to go. We'll give it just a minute here and jump in because I want to see how many of these we can get knocked out in an hour, because I think there's a good mix of, like, I think Brian's going to be able to tell us the answer right away, and there's going to be like one answer and here it is. And then there's some of them that I think are going to be like, it depends, let's dive in. So a good mix of those for sure.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll try not to ramble so we can try to get through as many of these as we can.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye on the clock for us. I forgot. I was going to count how many. I think we have 30-something questions already listed here. But if people are watching and something pops into your mind and you want to ask, drop it in the chat here, and I'll try to prioritize the ones for people that are here live, so we can get to your questions as well. So you're welcome to drop in any questions you have here. Yay, he's back. I'm sure you're talking about Brian and not me. All right, well, let's just do this, Brian. Let's jump in here and start answering questions. I got a little banner system set up here where I think I can put the question on the screen and read it off to you. And we'll just start with this one here, which is focusing on Divvy. So Vicky here, I paraphrased her question. Just so you know, if you send in a question, it looks a little bit different. I had like a character limit on this, so I had to shorten some of them. But Vicky said that she teaches entrepreneurs to build sites with Divvy. With Divvy 5 in the works, what's the real impact Divvy has on speed and now in moving forward? So I think Divvy's had a bit of a reputation, but it seems like they're moving things in the right direction. What are your thoughts on Divvy?
Yeah, so yeah, we work with a lot of Divvy clients, and I will say hasn't been my favorite. But the good news is going forward, I've played with a couple of the Divvy 5, beta fresh sites, and I will say they're doing a much better job. So I'm actually looking forward to the new Divvy 5. Stuff like the old Divvy had the one massive JS file, and I mean, you can defer or delay it, or I mean, you really can't delay it because it's literally everything is in that file, and so you're stuck with this massive file. And the new one, they're splitting it into separate JS scripts, like you find on like Generate, everything is separated by features. So you have a bunch of small files, which is how it should be, and then they're getting rid of that massive modules.waf icon thing that they had, where like you're not using 90% of it, but it's still loading everywhere. And then the CLS issues, I'm hoping, are resolved, because they've had a bunch of CLS problems, and they even like share this hacky code to add to your site to try to fix it. And that looks like that's cleared up now too. So I am looking forward to Divvy 5, and I have a feeling people running hundreds of sites, like it's hard for them to move to like Generate Press.
Sure.
Or sometimes like they're going to upgrade to probably Divvy 5. And so I think you'll find a lot better performance.
Seems like both Divvy and Elementor are making strides in that direction too, which is good since so many people use those systems. Excellent. All right, knocked one out. Let's see here. Jim asked, what, if any, managed hosting service do you recommend?
Yes, so I do always recommend managed hosting over doing it yourself, unless you want to spend time doing that, then go for it. But so the top ones I recommend is obviously Kinsta. Biased, I used to work there. That's still where I have all my sites. I like rocket.net. It's another one, very similar to Kinsta. But I don't think you can go wrong with either one of those two. And Big Scoots, another one I really like what they're doing. They're one that's kind of, people really haven't heard of them as much, but they've been chugging away for like, I think 10 plus years. And they're fully integrated with Cloudflare. They, some of their guys over there just like know it inside and out. So they're doing a great job. And then InstaWP. So I've loved InstaWP, their staging stuff. The moment he launched it, we're a paid customer. I use their tools all the time. Their hosting service is actually pretty good. I don't know if I would move everything over there from yet, but I would say like if you wanted to check it out, take a look, and they're doing a great job. And they're using kind of what WordPress VIP is using for their hosting. That's what they're using for their cloud stuff. So those are the kind of the 4 managed hosts that I personally recommend. And then you can go, you got Cloudways and all these hybrid stuff, but I tend to stick with those 4. You really can't. It'll save you a lot of time and headache, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm not much of a server person, and moving almost all my stuff over to rocket.net has been huge. I literally forget that my sites are hosted there because I never have to log in and mess with it. Everything just kind of seems to work, which is awesome. In fact, the other day, it was actually for the form for this registration. We had a problem with somebody's submission wasn't going through. There was an error, and you sent me some tips on it. And one of the tips was to change something in Cloudflare, but rocket.net manages all that Cloudflare stuff for you. So I just got on the support on rocket.net and said, hey, this is the issue I'm having. Here's what I need to change. Can you get this added to my Cloudflare? And they're like, we've already done all that. This is all taken care of. Here's what I think it might be. Let me dig in. And, went and applied some fixes for me and took care of it. I was like, man, that is way too easy. I enjoy that. And I like that you mentioned Big Scoots too. They've sponsored some stuff with the admin bar and helped us out on some webinars and stuff in the past, and got to spend some time with people from them at WordCamp US last year. And they seem like highly knowledgeable people. Like they're nerds for this stuff, which is just fun to hear them talk about it, even if I don't understand what they're saying.
Yep. Yeah. So those, and that's, I always recommend manage, just because like even myself, like I have the expertise to go manage like Linode VPS. Like I could do that if I wanted to, but like it's not worth it anymore if you're focused on building a business, building websites, whatever you're focused on. Like let the host deal with the hard stuff there, and then just spend more time on your business, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And I know we jumped straight into questions here, but we're going to come up with some that probably talk about Perfmatters here. So if you're watching this and you don't know who Brian is the co-founder of Perfmatters, which is one of my all-time favorite plugins for WordPress that does all kinds of optimizations for your website to speed things up. We've had Brian on many times on this channel before. If you go back in our library, there's a big series we did on Core Web Vitals and fixing every possible issue that could come up with your performance. He went through all those and did some really awesome presentations. We've also done dedicated webinars that are probably somewhat, maybe some features are outdated at this point, but where we went through the Perfmatters plugin, like setting by setting, and talked about what you should turn on, what you might not want to turn on. I would say probably 90% of that is probably still good, but they've added features since then. But definitely go back and check all those out. And Brian and his brother have the best support and customer service in the business. So if you ever run into problems, hitting up their support is always a good way to fix that. But I want to throw that in there before we get into any of those. But Sarah asked in here, is it possible to achieve better speed without a paid plugin? If you don't know, Perfmatters is a paid only plugin. So that might be where this question's coming from.
I would say yes, but it depends on what you mean too, because there are things like say image optimization. You can optimize an image in like Affinity Designer, or use a tool like Squish to optimize them before you upload. So if you look at everything like that, yes. Or like fonts, like you can make sure you're not loading too many Google fonts. Like all those little optimizations are free. Like you don't need to pay anyone to do those things. It's just a matter of, I guess, time spent. So like for image optimization, we use I like Imagify and Short Pixel. And we use those because they're automating the optimization when you upload an image. So it's just saving time beforehand. So that's, I think, one of the biggest things is time. And if you need help, I mean, there's some free optimization plugins on the repository right now that I'm sure like do an okay job. But if you ever need help, I would hesitate to. The support might be lacking there just because they have to pay the bills and they're probably focused on what's making money. So that's the biggest thing there.
I think what you're paying for is you're paying for the convenience, right? So you could go optimize all the images yourself one by one and do it that way and probably get the same results, or you can pay a little bit of money for something like Short Pixel that's just going to do it in the background. So you got to think about what your time is worth too.
Yep.
All right, let's see. Marcio asked here, best practices for third-party scripts / files. This could probably go in a lot of directions, but what did you take from this question?
I mean, whenever I see that, I think of like Google Tag Manager, all these, third-party things that you're loading. And I mean, really, there are only a few options. I mean, your options are, you can delay them on user interaction, and we have a delay.js feature like in our plugin.
So explain what that means.
So that means it will say you have Google Tag Manager script loading. It will delay it until you move your mouse or scroll on your screen, on the phone, anything. So basically interact with the page, and then it will load and do its normal thing. And some people will say that's kind of like hiding it, but like Google says not to load JS that isn't needed yet. So like, honestly, it's also following kind of Google's own guidelines. And ironically, Google's own scripts are some of the worst out there in terms of size. So it's kind of like one of those middle areas. Now, the other thing you can do is defer. So like, and defer basically pushes it to the bottom of the waterfall, makes it just load a little later. So that's another thing you can do. But defer won't have as huge of an impact as something like delay will either. So, but really, honestly, those are your two options. I mean, you can delay it or you can defer it. And you can use both delay and defer kind of if you're using our plugin at the same time. Anything that's like excluded from delay will automatically get deferred. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And I mean, obviously, always look at what you're loading, and like if you don't need something, like get rid of it. I guess a good example of this I've seen recently is Cloudflare always turns on a bunch of stuff by default if you're using them, your own account, and sometimes they turn on their RUM and analytics data scripts. And if you're not using their analytics, like their website analytics, like you don't need their script loading. So like definitely go turn it off. So like, run your website through GTmetrix. If you like, make sure you know everything that's loading, essentially is what I would say.
Yeah, and you can see pretty massive, speed score benefits from deferring, delaying mostly those JavaScript files. That can sometimes be the difference between 10 or 15 points, on that alone.
Yep. Oh yeah, another good point, I mentioned this too, is for like Google Fonts. If you host Google Fonts locally, like it's a huge difference, like way more than people think. And you would think that like Google servers are super fast and stuff, and which they are, but like adding any additional request just adds like quite a bit of overhead. It doesn't matter what, because there's just so many things going on. And once you like multiply that by different requests to different servers, like everything adds load. So anything you can get locally on your own site, like loading from the same connection as your, like say you're using Cloudflare and you want it all to load from Cloudflare at the same time, is what you really want. So yeah, just anything like that. Think about local, how many requests you have, stuff like that.
Excellent. Rob's here in the chat and he asked a question here, so I want to pull that up. He says, I want to prevent a number of scripts from loading for students of our LMS when they log in. I have a student user type. Any advice for identifying and implementing?
That will be tricky at the moment. So we do have a feature request, and it is something actually we're looking into. So we have a tool called our script manager in Perfmatters, and this will allow you to disable scripts or entire plugins wherever you want. And it supports regex. Like you can go as nerdy kind of as you want, as far as like, I want it loading here on this post type, but we don't have user roles yet. That's the one thing we don't have. And so it is something we're looking into. And like, if we add that, I think that would work in that scenario. You could be like, if these scripts aren't needed for this user type, because all those types are just getting injected into WordPress at that point. So we could easily query them and say, okay, these script manager rules, toggle on this role type for these rules. I think we'll get there and get that added. This would be a good example of that. So let me make a note of that, and I'll add another vote on that at least, so we can.
I was going to say you got another vote.
Yeah.
All right. Matthew asks here, what are your optimal settings for Perfmatters?
Optimal settings? That is a tricky question. But I would say it does matter, like, per stack is what I would like to say. So like, if you're running all Elementor sites, you're probably going to have some certain settings that work best for those sites with Perfmatters. If you're running all Divvy sites, then you probably have some certain things. So like a Divvy example is like, I don't think they do a good job at there's this option to do Google font optimization. They're not doing it the right way. And so like, I would say, turn that off, use the one in Perfmatters. It's things like that. You kind of, per stack is sometimes just differs a little bit. And so you do have to kind of just test and see what works best. And this but I will say, go ahead.
This is where your export import options in Perfmatters really comes in handy, because if you can kind of get Perfmatters set up to the way that's working really well for your stack, and you can export that file out and import it into any of your sites that are using the same stack. And maybe you still need to make 10% changes per site, here and there, but you're going to have the bulk of that done already. And that export import feature is really handy for that.
Yeah. And if you're just starting out, I will say, maybe visit those earlier YouTube tutorials we did, where, like 90% of the stuff is still there, even though we've added things. Because that's kind of like a good quick start guide to like just go through each toggle and kind of figure out what they are if you're brand new. And then we have a getting started doc on our own website. It's pretty basic, but it just goes through each thing. Like you want to like enable delay JS and see what works there, and then you want to go through deferred JS and stuff like that. So you want to go through each thing. But I will say it's kind of per stack. That's what I've noticed a lot. Like if you're running Elementor sites, Divvy sites. But we do work with clients that are just literally randomly doing every different stacks for every single client. So it goes all over the board.
So Brian did a really good job when we did those videos. We put together a quick reference guide on how to configure Perfmatters. This was back in March of 2022, so a couple years ago. But in this, this blog post, I'm going to put the link in the chat right now. It goes through and lists out every single one of the features, and then says, just a quick little blurb about what that feature is. But what I really like is it has what the risk of this feature is and what the reward is. So like, if you turn this on, is it more likely to break things, or is this probably not going to break anything? And then, what kind of reward could you get from that? So if it's something that's on here, the one that I pulled up right away was disabling emojis, a low risk of breaking something and a high reward from doing it. So that feels like one of the like no-brainer things everybody should probably turn on. But of course, some of those things are going to matter on your stack as well.
And we have a doc on every single feature on our site. I'm pretty obsessive with it when it comes to documentation. And so you can always click tooltips in our plugin and go to the doc to read more about it too.
Excellent. All right. Alfie asks here, do you think it's time for more people to start moving towards headless WordPress for sites that aren't e-commerce or membership sites? What are your thoughts on headless WordPress?
So this is a trick. Like as a person, a nerd that's obsessed with performance, I love the idea of headless. Like I love it. Like anything you can do to like strip out stuff. But I haven't found it myself to be very practical yet, to be honest. Like there's if you have just like let's take my personal brianleejackson.com website. I could probably easily go make it static right now. And I'm not like updating that all the time. Would it be faster? Probably, yeah, it would. But I just haven't found the need to do that yet. And so that's kind of my best answer there is I haven't found it very practical for most people that I'm working with. Like the people that are going static are like hardcore, all static, everything they can.
Sure.
And then everybody else is still kind of out here in the wild, just doing everything the normal way. I haven't really found people kind of in between, but I I would say if you want to play with it, there's some good static plugins out there that are doing, like, that's their whole business model, is making WordPress static. I would say play with it and see what you like. I personally have found it just to be more of a headache than it's worth at the moment.
I always kind of worry, like, okay, maybe the site I'm building today doesn't have any features that would make it more difficult with a static setup or a headless setup. But what if the client comes back in 3 months and wants to add something, and it's like, well, that's not going to work on how we're doing all this, and now we need to go change everything, you know? So I do kind of worry about all the trade-offs you're having to make, and like certain things just aren't going to work the same way, you know?
Yeah, there are now it is getting better for sure. Those businesses are like pushing hardcore static, adding improvements, integrations. But again, I would say it's something you need to test yourself. I personally, I'm not using static on anything of my stuff. So.
Fair enough. All right, Alex asking here, if the page loads in 500 milliseconds to a second, so half a second to a second, and the page is less than 3 megabytes, and it's hosted on a good server, but the page speed score is not great, around 70, do I really need to optimize for a better page speed score?
So yeah, this is actually a good topic, because I find so many people obsessed with the 100 score that they're losing the whole point of what the tool is designed for. So when it comes to performance, like, you want it to feel fast. Like that's the first, is what they call perceived performance. And it means it feels fast to the user. That's one of the most important things. Next would be load time. Like, and the 1 second there is usually what I tell people, like, aim for under 1 second, like total load time. And the size does matter. And like, you're probably going to see that contribute to everything else. The score, though, is what you want to focus on, is the real user data. So, and I have a doc I published actually recently on our Perfmatters site. It's called PageSpeed Insights, Real User Data versus Lab Data, Drastic Differences. That's what the title is. And I made it simply because it came up so often in tickets of people trying to like get from that 95 to 100 when they're losing the point of they're already passing core web vitals perhaps. And they actually don't need to do anything more, and doing more would actually make the site actually behave worse. So all Google cares about is LCP, INP, and CLS. Those are the 3 core web vitals metrics. And the real user data is at those top of the tests. The lab data at the bottom, that's purposely throttled super slow and showing you the worst possible scenario. So like, you could be at a 70 score and technically be passing core web vitals okay. That makes sense. Now, you probably can't be at a 30 score and passing core web vitals. There is kind of like I would say 70, 75, then you're getting to the point where like you might be fine. But again, everything you can do to fix that lab data should show in that real user data over time. So that's why the tool is there, is to help you fix things and improve the data over time. But again, don't obsess over that lab score at the very bottom there.
Yeah, there's definitely diminishing returns at some point, but I kind of blame Google because, anytime if you run a lighthouse test and you get all 100s, there are fireworks. And once you see the fireworks, you can't not try to get the fireworks. So it's just the way it works.
That is true. Yeah. And always do making as many improvements as you can. But yeah, sometimes you can overdo it.
All right. We're getting into opinion territory here. What is the best page builder in terms of speed?
So I like what Bricks is doing. That's probably one of my most favorite at the moment. And again, I'm not a big fan of page builders just in general. I much prefer what GeneratePress and GenerateBlocks is doing. Like, I mean, you could almost say that they are kind of a page builder now with how much stuff you can do.
Sure.
But if I had to pick one page builder, Bricks would be my top choice. However, this might surprise people. Elementor would probably be my second choice now over everything else.
Interesting.
Elementor has actually been making quite a few improvements lately. They're not quite there yet, but someone on their team has been going back trying to fix all the bloat from earlier years when they were just scaling really fast. And so the more I work on Elementor sites, I'm actually impressed with the stuff they're doing.
So you're not lumping all the block packages into that page builder category. So the cadences, generate blocks, all those.
I am not.
How do they compare to what you're defining as like the traditional page builder?
Well, and if you're going to put generate press and generate blocks side by side with Elementor, I will pick generate press and generate blocks every single day. Like there's no comparison with Elementor in terms of pure performance. But again, I don't technically say those are page builders either for me. But if I had to rank them, I would say generate press, generate blocks, top, cadence blocks. And I would throw bricks in there, then Elementor. Those are kind of the ones I prefer to work with.
Hey, Elementor sneaking in the top 5. I didn't have that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back in my old videos, I was not a big fan of Elementor.
All right, let's see here. Next question is, there are different tools to measure time to first byte. Which one is the best and why?
Yeah, so there are a couple tools. Let me pull, I had something up here for this. Okay, so you can't see this in PageSpeed Insights. You can see the server response time, but if you want to measure TTFB like across the board, there's this one called Speed Vitals, and it's just speedvitals.com. They have a TTFB tester on their site. I use that actually one quite a bit. And then Debug Bear is another tool I really like. They have a TTFB tester now too. And then KeyCDN has one as well. They're all pretty similar, but again, sometimes it's nice to just run it through a couple different of these free tools. They're all free. Yeah. And just see, if you notice any discrepancies anywhere. So I always use multiple tools. But I would be careful with these tools as well too, because based on what you're using, sometimes with Cloudflare, you'll see like this dynamic header where it's actually not showing it hitting cache, where actually in the real world it is. So you also sometimes want to use a tool like GTmetrix or web page test to see what it's saying too. So like I have seen these tools that are just measuring TTFB say it's like really high TTFB, where it's still hitting cache, and on GTmetrix it'll show like super quick. So keep that in mind too. Don't take the tools always for what they're saying.
Yeah, probably better to test on a couple to make sure. ClickLabs Dev is here in the chat and said, I have a simple site with no images, only SVGs, and with Perfmatters on, just the basic settings like minification and deferred JavaScript. It was testing slower than without. What did I do wrong? So where might they look first?
Well, on that one, I would say probably maybe reach out to us, and I'm happy to take a look at the site later. Like send us a message on our site. And there could be so many things going on there. Like it could be like hitting an uncached version when you're running another test. It could be, all sorts of things going on there. I'd have to see the before and after and really analyze it. But what did I do wrong? Yeah, I can tell you what you did wrong, I'm sure. I would say reach out on that one. I'm sure I can spot it.
There you go. All right. I know that anytime you reference another server, there's latency, but what about sites that depend on ads and ad networks? What is the best way to optimize a site that presents display advertising?
Yeah, so this is a tricky one because many times, like you can delay ad networks on user interaction, but many times the ad networks don't want you to do that. It can impact your, this CPM, stuff, because if you're slightly delaying the data longer, like it can influence stuff like that. So if you're working with like Mediavine, like we have an integration with them where we like you can toggle on our quick exclusion to exclude their stuff because they don't want you to delay things. And they're really responsible at that point for optimizing the ad networks on their side. So when it comes to ad networks, there's not much you can do other than you can add these things called like pre-connect and DNS prefetch. So if you go to our Perfmatters site, basically what these do is it helps speed up the request to the ad network while you're loading the site. That's about all you can do to fix that stuff. Yeah, so delay and defer kind of off the table for a lot of that stuff. And yeah, you're really up to the ad network. I would use it. My one suggestion there would be, I like Mediavine over Raptive. If you have to pick one, it's AdThrive turned into Raptive is what they are now.
Okay.
And personally, I've used Mediavine in the past. I think they're the best in terms of performance if you have to pick one. So just throw that.
Best of a bad choice though, because I don't think I've ever been to a site that's full of ads that wasn't slow as hell. You know.
Yeah, that's best of it. But Mediavine, their team does the best that they can to like try to actually optimize how the ads are loading and do stuff like that. So.
All right, let's see here. My page speed scores decrease when I'm running Lightspeed and quickcloud. Am I doing something wrong? I have programmatic ads.
That's another one I'd probably have to take a look at. I don't think it has anything to do with Lightspeed and quickcloud, because if things are hitting cache properly with Lightspeed, like it should be really fast. So there's probably there are other influences going on there.
Well, then
it could be ads. It could be the ads too, because that's going to dynamically change based on what's loaded.
Yeah, it's not going to matter what your server is at that point. All right, Erica asks, best practices for dealing with the JavaScript that cannot be delayed or deferred, such as those with the user-centrics tool that Termageddon uses. I know me and you have discussed this one a few times before.
I will say quickly too on that last question, turn all the ads off, do a test. That's an easy way to just see what's happening. If it's consistently like great scores, then you turn the ads back on and it's just all over the place. Well, at least you know where it's coming from.
Yeah, the process of elimination.
Yeah. So Termageddon. So this is a tricky one, and I'm dealing with this all the time right now. So many people, I think they're doing a great job because there's a lot of people using Termageddon and the user-centric thing. So I don't want to I love what Termageddon's doing, but I will say this: you make up your own mind here on what you want to do. Termageddon has this thing where you can use their custom scripts box, and you can remove their preload and delay user-centrics on user interaction. It is possible to do that, just so everyone is aware. Now, I will say probably Hans over at Termageddon, he will probably say he doesn't want you to do that. And I'm not a lawyer either, so the legal stuff, I'm not going to touch on any of that. If it's loading on user interaction, is that still legal? Like it's still blocking things, but it's on interaction. So I'm not going to touch on that. That you have to make up your own mind. There are ways though to delay the thing on user interaction. And that fixes obviously most of the performance issues there. I will say that you should look at the beta version 3 that they have now in their plugin. They have a doc on their site too. I think they've been trying to fix some of the performance stuff. And I think Hans is pushing people to this beta 3s from what I've seen. So I would say if you're not using that yet, maybe go turn that on, see if it helps at all first before doing any of these drastic, trying to delay it or anything. So that's about all I can say is like, try the beta 3. If you want to go more aggressive, we can help with, delay and stuff like that. But again, it is a gray area with the legal stuff. And it's not on the Termageddon team. It's on the user-centrics team, which is, a different company. Like they're just using them. So I think user-centrics right now is struggling to try to kind of like the Elementor thing. They're going back, trying to fix things where they scaled too fast.
Yeah, there are some options in the Termageddon. If you use the Termageddon plugin to manage all that stuff, there are ways where it can look up like the location of the visitor, because some people, depending on what their laws are, where they are, might not need the cookie consent. So that might help with at least some of the visitors might not have to see it. But I know that's definitely on Termageddon's radar, and I was going to bring it up, but you said it anyways. Termageddon didn't actually create that tool. They've just partnered with user-centrics, and it's a separate company. So they're a little bit hamstrung on it. But definitely something I know they're looking at as well. All right. This one is asked by Jonathan. He says, my hosting stack is based on Nginx, and it's extremely fast, but I see people argue that Lightspeed servers are faster and better. What's better for performance and reliability?
I will say Lightspeed is doing a great job. Like I will say that, and it is super fast, especially like if you're using their quickcloud and stuff like that. I work on a lot of Lightspeed sites these days. However, I don't know if it's enough for a lot of people to even to bother switching. Like I wouldn't uproot my whole ecosystem to move to a Lightspeed server at this moment, if that helps at all. Kinsta, Rocket, they're all using like Nginx. at the moment, and I wouldn't move all my sites to a different managed provider just because they were using Lightspeed. With things like Cloudflare and Edge Cache these days, Cloudflare is really doing the bulk of the work on a lot of these sites now, and the servers are just not getting hit as much as it was 3-5 years ago. With that being said, Lightspeed is really, really fast. So I would say this matters more for cheaper providers. So if I hate recommending cheap providers, but if you're on a super tight budget, or you're working maybe with somebody a client that doesn't want to pay and you can't get them to pay more, if your options are between like SiteGround or hosting, I always get this name wrong. Is it Hostinger?
Yeah.
What's tricky to say? I'd probably go with Hostinger because they're using Lightspeed to power everything. And for a super cheap site that's probably on shared servers and stuff like that, I would rather be using Lightspeed than the alternative. Like, it might give you just a little extra boost on that slower server.
Yeah, and I was looking at the way the Rocket.net dashboard works and their integration with Cloudflare. You can see basically every bit of traffic, whether it hit your server or whether Cloudflare served it. And most of my sites, it's like 80-85% of everything is just being served by Cloudflare. So there's not that much hitting the server in the long run anyways, So
yeah. And there's a reason a bunch of these Fortune 500 companies, these massive companies, like there's a reason they're all still using Nginx. Lightspeed is definitely gaining market share. But again, there's just with everything in the cloud these days, the server is mattering less and less than it did years ago.
All right. Is Cloudflare, the enterprise version as offered by Flying CDN, worth it for speed and optimization? Are there any plans, please say yes, that Perfmatters offers a caching of their own performance CDN?
So there is something I want to touch on, because this question does come up a lot recently, is cache is on our radar, and I think we probably will end up doing it. That's my best answer at the moment. But we are working on this big feature behind the scenes. We've been working on it for months, that we're going to launch hopefully here this summer. I'm not going to say what it is yet, but it is something I will be using on all of our own sites, and I know a lot of our clients will use it too. So that's all I can say about there. We're working on this massive feature, and with just the two of us, it takes longer to code out some of these huge things behind the scenes. This is in between our regular updates and features that we're pushing. So that's all I want to say about that. As we get further along, I am going to be reaching out to like some beta testers for stuff like this.
Okay.
But we are working on something that's taking a bigger priority over, I would say, cache. If it wasn't for this one thing, we might have already started perhaps working on some cache things. But I do know a lot of people want us to do cache. And early days, I was kind of trying to see where it was going with hosting providers, and like with Kinsta, like you don't need a cache solution at Kinsta. So even if we launch cache, it's not going to be used somewhat everywhere,
right?
But I will say that. So
okay, so when you get closer to being able to tell us what this big feature is, you can come announce this on the admin bar. I'm just saying the invitation is there.
Yeah, we'll have to do that. Yeah, quick video or something on announcing.
Excellent.
But it is a feature I'm super excited about, and again, something I'm going to be using on all of our own sites. Usually, the things that I want to use usually works out good for us in terms of clients usually need it or want it too.
I mean, you're seeing these problems all day long, so
yeah. So it is a big feature, and it's one of these things that we're having to build a whole like kind of UI for, and it's a whole thing. It's not just like a couple week project; it's like a month's project. So
excited.
But I will say, just to top on the flying thing, I will say like the Cloudflare Enterprise, if you can get that from anyone, like Cloudflare Enterprise is really good performance.
All right. Speaking of Cloudflare, would you still be using Short Pixel on a site where Cloudflare Enterprise is being used?
So this kind of touches on what I was just saying. Cloudflare Enterprise is great for performance. However, I'm not a fan of their image optimization. I just don't think it's aggressive enough. And I think they're doing that based on they have to find a medium, somewhere in terms of like how aggressive they are and how not in terms of quality. And I've just found I'm still using an image optimization plugin. over Cloudflare. Like I have the option to go use Cloudflare right now for that, and I'm not. I'm using an image optimization plugin. So I found the images to be, I've tested this a while back, and it was like, I found like maybe 30% smaller if I was using like with aggressive image optimization settings in a plugin. So,
and images are such a simple thing, and I think we take it for granted because basically everybody except one person here who had no images on their website, everybody has images on their website. You take it for granted that sometimes that is the heaviest thing on your page. I will go run stuff for a client. Somebody comes to me and they're having performance issues, and I'll go run through GT metrics or whatever. I'm like, well, none of these images on the homepage are optimized, and they're huge, and there's 5 huge backgrounds inside of a slider. Like if we just reduced all these images, we could probably cut the size of your page down by half. Like we forget that images can be the biggest thing on a website sometimes,
Yeah, and for LCP, quickest way to like quick tips is use GT metrics. I love their graph as the percentages of your site. So if you run a site through it and says 85% of the site weight is images, then immediately, okay, I need to work on my images right away first here. So then you'd be like, do you have lazy loading running? If you don't, enable lazy loading. Now let's say that cuts the images down to 40%. Now, if it's still at 40%, you're like, it should not be that high because everything below the fold should be gone at that point.
Right.
So if it's 40% just above the fold, then you have images that are too big. And anything above the fold is going to impact your LCP. So that's immediately, then I would go look at every single image above the fold and see what's going on there. And it probably, you have some massive hero banner that needs to be compressed more, something like that. But like that's a quick tip for really drastically reducing LCP.
Do you have a target file size in mind for, let's say, some kind of like hero image background that's taken up full screen? What are you trying to get that down to?
So I've always used 100 kilobytes is what I've used for like the last 5-7 years. I get everything under 100 kilobytes. Now, I always try to go smaller, but like for the banner images, sometimes they're pretty big, and especially on like a photography website, those are trickier.
Or if there's transparency and you have to use a PNG And
100 kilobytes is the threshold. Get it under 100 kilobytes. Everything needs to be under. And
you probably said that to me like 4 years ago, and anytime I upload an image and it's like 112, I'm like, the little Brian on my shoulder is just like, shaming me. I'm like, okay, I have to go work on this image and then re-upload it.
Well, and I'm not the only one. Like Debugbear too uses that as the threshold. Like they'll start flagging it yellow if you're above 100 kilobytes. Others are using that same threshold. And I will say, like, use the newest image formats. I just recently migrated everything to AVIV. I don't know if that's pronounced correctly, but and if you check out my newsletter, I did my whole last issue was on a migration from WebP to AVIV and the improvements we saw just going from WebP to AVIV. So that some interesting stats I recorded for that. Excellent.
All right. Recommended caching solutions or methods that don't mess up form submissions.
So this one I wasn't really sure on. I haven't really run into that many cache things messing up form submissions. But I think you ran into one just the other day though, didn't you? With yours. So there are cache can mess up form stuff. Yeah, so I'm not really sure on this one. I mean, if you're running into some major issues, I mean, you could just bypass cache on your form submission page. I mean, that's one option. It's not the whole site, so it's not going to kill everything. But I'd have to probably know more about this one to help with that. But like, I mean, even our contact pages, like they're hitting cache, so I'd have to know more.
Yeah, I will say I used to be a person that would put the contact form in the footer until I thought about the fact that I'm loading this contact form with all of its scripts and everything on every single page. So I'm pretty conscious now of like, let me just put contact forms on the pages that they need to be on. And then I can deal with those separately. If I have to do any different, optimization tweaks, it's just to that specific page. And like, I'm less worried about the performance numbers of a contact page. Obviously you want it to load quickly. It can't take 10 seconds to load, but I'm not worried about that, 1 second loading time versus 1.5 seconds when somebody's already clicked through and they're wanting to submit a form. So I can be a little bit more relaxed on settings there.
And actually, what you said is might be what he's referring to. If a form is setting like a cookie or something, and it's bypassing cache, and you had it in the footer, like it could be overriding cache on your whole site. So, and yeah, that's a problem. And that in that case, I would do exactly what you're doing. Like just put it on the contact page, take it out of the footer.
All right. Is caching mobile still a thing with responsive design? This user said they still see a lot in caching plugin options to like a separate mobile cache.
It is, and it's because there's some functions in WordPress that it's WP is mobile is like a function, and this relies sometimes on mobile cache being separate. And with all these cache layers these days, there's different cache buckets. Is what they're called. So it is still a thing. However, it's kind of getting pushed into the background and getting less obvious. So like take Rocket, for example. They enable mobile cache out of the gate now. They don't have a separate option. It's just automatically enabled behind the scenes running. So things like that are happening more where it's still there, but you're probably going to see it less and less. But there are things like in Perfmatters, we rely on that function for a few things. We're trying to move more towards media queries for some of our stuff like preloads and stuff, but it's a little trickier when it comes to our script manager and things. So, but it is still there. And if you have mobile cache, I mean, I would only enable it if you really need it. And if you don't think you need it, you probably don't.
Fair enough. All right, this is one I've wondered too, so I was glad this one got asked. There are a lot of these like newsletter, CRM, make your WordPress website do all kinds of things that maybe WordPress wasn't designed for. So do these newsletter or CRM type plugins hinder performance, and what are some ways to remedy it if they do?
Yeah, so one I was actually working with yesterday was MailerLite. And I like MailerLite as a solution. I do not like their embed form. Whoever rolled that out was not thinking about performance. But basically, the guy had a MailerLite form in his header, like above the fold, and he was using their embed script. And the problem with their embed script was, first off, it's loading third party. It had 3 or 4 JS files, which were quite large, and it was also loading, I think, 3 Google fonts from Google servers. So like just from a simple one little box with an email form. And it was actually like literally, it was slowing down his site quite a bit. And so for that, the suggestion, he was going to look at some alternative solutions for that, but I think he was going to end up moving it to like a dedicated page for the sign up. So like do a CTA for the button.
Sure.
And move it over. Kind of your same thing with the contact form. But so that's the answer is yes, they can drastically hurt a site. And it's mainly because of these third-party things.
So when I read this, I was actually not necessarily thinking of like the third-party embeds, but the like native plugin. So I'm just going to pick one, and I'm not picking on them. I'm just going to use an example like Fluent CRM. You install Fluent CRM on your website, and now your WordPress website is your CRM. You're not using a third party. It's managing contacts, sending out emails, doing email automation, all those kinds of things from directly in WordPress. That's kind of what I assume this person might be asking about.
Yeah, if you're talking about that, it's probably going to matter less front end, more back end. I mean, especially with Cloudflare and cache these days, like the site's still going to hit cache. However, everything you add to the site is going to impact it at some level. And uncached hits on the site could be impacted by that. So I'm actually not a fan of these at all. I would never use a CRM in my WordPress site personally. Again, I know there's a lot of things. I know like there's like, what's that Hedgehog one? I know they're pretty popular. I forget the name of it, but someone will know what I'm talking about. But there are a lot of these out there. I don't like bloating my WordPress installs. That's just a personal thing. And they will, like, you're going to need a better server, more RAM, more CPU to run all of these things when you're doing stuff like this. So that's why I'm not a fan. Like if you want to have a dedicated server and pay for that, like then sure, like, you know, you can do a CRM and stuff like that. But if you're trying to run all these CRM stuffs on like a $5 a month SiteGround site, which I see people doing, so they are out there doing it, that's not going to be good.
Yeah, I was dealing with a client site I inherited recently, and they used one of those plugins. I won't say which one because I don't know if it was actually their fault or not. We had them on a pretty decent server, but every time they would send out their newsletter from the website, we would have major issues. The website would go down, and like,
Yeah.
you know, of course, the newsletter they're sending out is saying, "Hey, come to our website," and then they'd click on it,
Oh,
and the website was down. It's like, I think y'all need to move on to something else. So that was my recommendation.
So I've always said there's things to use WordPress for, and there's things not. For my newsletter, I use Substack, not even WordPress. I love Substack. So
yeah. All right, we got a question here from the audience. Which CAPTCHA do you recommend? I think Google Recapture still causes performance issues.
Yeah. So Google Recapture is like one of the worst, literally one of the worst possible things in terms of performance. And I've seen it drop a score like 30, 40 points by itself. I mean, it's just horrible. And I think it loads like 500 kilobytes of JS, and it loads Google Fonts. It's just, there's so many things. It's just horrible. But so I'm just bringing up a doc here. But so I like the WP Armor plugin. There's a free version, integrates with a bunch of forms. I love that plugin. He's doing a great job. And then there's Cloudflare Turnstile. That still has a little weight to it, but it's way less than Google Recapture. So, and there's another plugin called Simple Cloudflare Turnstile, which you can use as well. And those are the two primary things that I like. There's a couple others. We have a doc on our Perfmatters site. You can go look at the alternatives. I recommend more, but those are the two.
I know I hear some people using the HCAPTCHA as well, and I don't know anything about that myself, but
yeah, that's somewhere, I would say that's somewhere in between, but like still it's, yeah, I really like Turnstile or the WP Armor approach. Those are my two favorites.
Excellent. All right, we have a question about the Perfmatters plugin. It sounds like this user is having some trouble with the tooltips and them being keyboard accessible. So what help do you have for them?
So on this one, we do have a accessibility mode in our plugin, which will turn the tooltips inline, like it will spit them out inline. So, and then the toggles turn into checkboxes. So I'm wondering if this person missed that option, perhaps. I would say try that. If you're having problems with the accessibility mode, like reach out to us and we're happy to take a look at fixing that. Obviously, we're not always constantly testing in this mode just because we're not in that mode. But we did build accessibility mode out because we do have some visually impaired people that are using Perfmatters. And so we actually did build out that on purpose.
Okay. And I think that's in settings, tools, and then there's a checkbox for turning that on.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, look at that if you have any problems with it, but that should, yeah, it should fix most of the issues.
Excellent. What's the best way to optimize images? iStock files are big, even at small dimensions. Should I upload large files if short pixel will, or should I upload large files if short pixel will compress them anyway? So I think I had to paraphrase this one too, but should you just let short pixel do all the work, or should you be doing some of these optimizations before you upload it into your install?
You shouldn't rely on short pixel for everything. So here's just, this is what I do, and everyone can like find their own settings. But like if I was taking a picture from iStock, I would throw it into a tool like Affinity Designer. That's my tool, or you could use Photoshop, whatever tool you have. I size it down to 1400 pixels. I don't know. Don't ask me why. I just like that size. I found it to be the sweet sauce for my stuff. I size it down to 1400 pixels. Then I upload it to my WordPress site. And so what I have found was like, say it's like 1.5 megabytes from iStock. By the time it gets down to 1400 pixels wide, and then it gets through short pixel, it should be under that 100 kilobytes. That's just the sweet spot for what I found when I'm going from that to resizing it to compression.
Perfect. I always do my 1920 as like a max, and I think that's because like that's what my monitor resolution was at the time. So it's like I'll just pick that. I don't know.
Yeah,
so
everyone has their own settings, but like you can find kind of the sweet spot for at the end result, like what it's going to end up, and then just kind of roll with that to make sure they're always that size.
Yeah. All right, we got about 6 minutes left here, so I'm gonna have to pick and choose a few of these questions. We have more than I think we're gonna get to. We kind of talked about the caching, Perfmatters offering caching. That was a cryptic answer, so we'll have to come back to that another day. Let's see. Well, we'll stick on the caching thing here. So since there's not caching in Perfmatters, what do you recommend is the best cache alongside Perfmatters? WP Rocket has upped their prices and you recommended WP fastest cache on your site. Is that still what you recommend?
Yeah, so I like fastest cache. I like what Flying's doing too. I think both of those are fine for solutions. And then if you're using a managed hosting provider, I mean, you might not even need one. So it depends on what you are using. And if you're using like Cloudways, Breeze is there, SiteGround has their SG Optimizer plugin for cache, and sometimes it can be better to use their own cache solution because I've found that like they just integrate better with their purging and stuff. And then if you're like using Hostinger, if you're on a lightspeed server, you're probably going to want to use the lightspeed cache plugin. So those are my answers. So Rocket, fastest cache, Flying, and then depending on what your host has, look at that. And then lightspeed, I always usually recommend lightspeed cache.
Perfect. All right. Speaking of Flying Press here, when using Flying Press together with Perfmatters, which options should I use for the best performance? I'm guessing there's some feature. I haven't used Flying Press, so I'm guessing there's feature parity here.
Yeah, there's a lot of I mean, it's similar to Rocket. There's a lot of overlap. Sure. And like Delay.js on UCS. So this one, it's hard to say. Like I would say you have to do your own testing because we do things differently for like many of these features. For like our remove unused CSS, like we're using like a hybrid approach because we like the lightweight style of it, and he's doing more things on the cloud side of things with it. So it's just a totally different approach. And this goes with Rocket too. Like we're doing things different than them for many of these things, and so I think you have to do your own testing. Many things are still modular in both plugins. Sometimes one or two of these that will have to disable one of the other things if it's running to prevent breakage. But for the most part, you can turn things off in one, use it in the other, vice versa type of thing like that.
Gotcha. All right. Does full HTML caching on Cloudflare using super page cache or maybe APO, I believe that's automatic platform optimization, do away with a lot of the performance stuff needed?
I mean, that will only help with the cache part of things. So like it will increase your server response time, which helps your FCP, your LCP, stuff like that. So it definitely helps with all of those things. But it's not going to fix any code. It's not going to fix third-party network scripts. It's not going to fix images. It's not going to fix any of that stuff. So you still need to do all these other optimization tricks. That will speed up, server and stuff with like LCP and FCP.
All right, we're going to try to sneak two more in here in the next 3 minutes here. So we got one here from the chat. If my site is hosted on a Germany server and uses Cloudflare, does the server location still matter since Cloudflare serves most of the content from its own nearby data centers?
So it depends if you're using Cloudflare Edge Cache, which if you don't know what that is, like you can go look it up. It's basically where the whole site is hitting Cloudflare. So there's a difference between just free Cloudflare and Cloudflare Edge Cache. And like if you're confused on that, like you can reach out to us and I can explain it better. But if you're using Edge Cache, it won't matter as much because Cloudflare is going to propagate the entire site to all the different locations. So like if you're visiting from the US or Germany, you're going to hit the closest Cloudflare site to deliver the site. However, it still does matter if you're bypassing cache. So if something expires from cache, bypass cache, you're excluding it from cache on purpose, then it's still going to route to your original server. And that's where it would still matter. So you do still want to host your site where the most of your visitors are. Like for me, a bulk of our stuff is in the US, so I'm not going to ever host my site in Germany. Even though I have Cloudflare Edge Cache, I'm still going to host my site in the US. So yeah, it does matter, but it matters less with Cloudflare.
And that Edge Cache is not on the free plan. So if you're wondering if you have it or not, if you're just on the free plan, you don't have it.
Correct. Now there are ways if you use the super page cache plugin. I guess I forgot to mention that plugin. I do like that for cache too. So super page cache has a way to implement it for free type of way. And then there's Cloudflare APO, which we mentioned too. Mm-hmm. It's like a $5 a month add-on from Cloudflare that you can enable. And then many hosting providers like Rocket.net, Kinsta all have this as an integration for free as part of the hosting plan. So different ways you can get it. All
right. I'm going to selfishly throw one of my questions in here and we'll wrap it up. Let's see. Now I got banners on the screen I don't mean to have. There we go. The WordPress performance team has been kind of on a tear over the last couple of years, doing lots of stuff. I know they've stuck some stuff in a plugin, and then now it's kind of making its way to core. I would just love to hear your thoughts on how you think the WordPress performance team is doing.
I actually think they're doing a great job. I mean, if you're comparing this to like 5 years ago when literally nothing happened, I would say it's night and day. And I think, what is his name? Is it Felix? Forget the guy doing some of that stuff, but the guy that worked a lot on the speculative loading thing that they just rolled out. Like, I mean, that was a couple guys that were like, you know, nerds that were like, we want to see some of this stuff finally like get into WordPress. And so I think they're really doing a good job. Speculative loading is really like, we had our instant page feature in Perfmatters, which a lot of people use, and this basically replaces that and deprecated it. So we've deprecated our instant page, and we're fully, you know, on the speculative loading bandwagon at this point. We even added options to change different speculative loading features in Perfmatters. But I think they're doing a good job. Could there be more done? For sure.
Always. I'm just glad to hear that. Like the instant page is something that I love just because it makes your website feel so much faster. You know, it might not affect your scores, but when you're browsing a page, if you turn that feature on and off, you will notice a difference browsing your website. But what I was afraid you would say is like, well, they added it, but it's not to our standards, so we're disabling it and we're using our own. But that's not what you're saying. You're saying like, hey, they did it and it's great, and just use that, and we don't have to have ours anymore, which is a good sign to me.
And we'll always, I mean, if there's something they're doing wrong, we won't use it. I mean, because we have, so in a good example is fetch priority. This is one that they do not do good at the moment. And we have an option in Perfmatters to literally disable core WordPress fetch priority, just turn it all off. Because the problem they have is they don't detect all the images properly still above the fold, and so they'll get fetch on things that are down the page further. So I will always adopt features that they do the right way. So speculative loading is one that they did the right way, and it works really well. So I guess there's maybe good and bad, because fetch is an example of one that it's not their fault though. It's just it's not there yet.
Gotcha. Excellent. Well, Brian, we are at the hour mark. I appreciate you doing this and jumping in here and answering a ton of questions. We got through almost all of them. I think, in fact, some of these last ones were just ones I threw in here in case we needed a few extras. So I do appreciate this. I think my plan is going to be to take the recording of this and maybe work with ChatGPT to put a little document together of all your questions and answers here, so we can have all this in written format too, which I know is helpful for some folks. And we talked about Perfmatters a lot. If you guys are interested in Perfmatters and want to check it out, if you use the code TheAdminBar as your coupon code, that'll knock 20% off the price, which is always good to save a few dollars. And it sounds like we have some big things coming this summer from Perfmatters, which I'm excited about hearing about. But if there's anything else we should know, Brian, the floor is yours.
No, I think that's it. And if we didn't get to answer to one of your questions, you know, you can send us a message too. I'm happy to answer it privately too. But yeah, I think that's it. We are working on this new feature. I think people will really like it. I know a lot of our clients, I think, will use it. So, and I'm super excited about it. It's just not quite there yet. I think somewhere here in the summer, we'll have it finished, and we will probably roll it out in beta. So people can use it. We're not going to wait till it's like fully polished. It will just be like kind of behind a beta thing, and people can enable it and start playing around with it if they want. Excellent.
Well, I'm going to end the stream and then twist Brian's arm in the waiting room here to see if I can get it out of him, but your secret will be safe with me. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody coming and hanging out and submitting all these questions. It was really fun to go through this and learn a bunch of stuff. So I appreciate y'all coming and hanging out with us. We do have a bunch of events coming up, so I'm going to be gone all next week. And then as I come back, we have an event with Amber Hines where we're going to be talking about the European Accessibility Act that goes into effect in like 9 days. We have another one with Abby Woods where she's going to be talking to us about getting video testimonials from your clients. She's doing some really, really cool things. And I cannot tell you how much more impressive a video testimonial is over a Google review. It is a little bit more work, but it is definitely worth it. So some really cool things going on there. So if you go to theadminbar.com/events, you can get to all those things as well. And all this live stream that you're watching right now is also on that events page. I'll update that with all these questions and answers as I can work with AI to help me out, parse all this information, and make it a little bit easier to put together. So Brian, again, I appreciate it so much. You've been such a huge supporter of the admin bar and helping our people out. Do really, really appreciate it. And we'll do this again soon.
Cool. Yeah, likewise. Yeah, you've been a big help for us too.
Excellent. I like it. All right. Hope everybody has a great rest of the day, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.